So today I thought I'd take up the small topic of what is God. And so let me start off by saying, I have no idea. Okay, that concludes our session today. So it's a fascinating thing, and the reason I've been meaning to bring this up for a long time, and the reason is that even when you look at the teachings of the masters, and not just in heartfulness, but I mean across the board, and we look at the various teachings of religions and everything, everybody kind of has their take on what this idea of God is. And what I found is, in my studies, when I came across Babaji's writings, he really brought a fresh and some very much scientific perspective to this whole concept. And what the beautiful thing about it is that I found is that he's not just proposing some philosophical ideas. Babaji had the ability to read nature and to understand from direct perception the workings of the universe, how it started, how it began, how it goes on, and how we ourselves in our personal journey are able to reach to that point where we are the embodiment of that divinity in which we already are, but without fear, without hesitation, without doubt. And that's called what we can call realization. It's called many different things. Okay, now, in heartfulness, the masters talk about God in so many different ways that it can be a little daunting sometimes, because though Babaji clarifies, he says that God really doesn't, whatever God is, it doesn't possess mind. It doesn't possess mind as we do. Okay, so he explains that the reason that that's the case is because if God possessed mind, it would be a judging, thinking God, and therefore could be a, loving, vengeful God. It could be all kinds of things. God could have power and God could lose power. He goes on and on explaining about this. So basically the idea is that this thing we call God, is beyond mind, our thinking mind is beyond that. So we can't grasp it with our thinking mind. We can't. It can't be thought out. So Babaji says, though, we can experience that. And then comes the question is, how do we experience that? Well, we know in our meditations, we definitely see that progression from the beginning of our meditation where we're thinking. We're absorbed in our wall of thoughts. And as the meditation progresses, we withdraw from that, our awareness away from that activity. And we start to go into a deeper stages of consciousness. And by the end of the meditation, we are not caught up in those ideas and those thought stream and everything. We're in a completely different state, which we call the meditative state. All right, I could start at any number of places. And when I started looking at some of the books, I quickly saw that this is a topic that could cover an entire day's workshop. And I may put that together for the future because some of the things I've had to actually leave out because they're just so far out there that it's just hard to really grasp it all in one go. Okay. Now, let me start here. In the prayer of heartfulness, there's a line at the end that says, it's talking about referring to the Master. The prayer refers to the Master. And at the end it says, "Thou art the only God and power." That can bring us up to that stage. And so I wondered about that for a long time, and I actually brought that up to Daji one time that we were having breakfast together. And even he stopped for a second and was pondering this, is that God creates. Chariji said this: God creates, and human beings are in charge of evolution. So God creates, but human beings are in charge of evolution. Now, that's a scary kind of thought. But if we look around us, if we look at the world, we see, in fact, that that's very true. And we call it, we say, oh, humans have free will, all of this. Okay. So we do have a will, and we can utilize it. But there's also the divine will that Babaji talks about. And so we have access in our limited way to this willpower. And because we possess mind, Babaji says mind is the instrument that brings things into action. Okay. So mind is our tool to function in this world of ours. And a master is one whose mind is so purified that it becomes the divine mind, the godly mind, as Babaji says. And this is when we have beings that come in the form of what we call spiritual guides or spiritual masters. They appear just as we do, but their mind is not, and will is not limited as ours is. And they have the capacity to control everything in nature and the cosmic powers and everything. So this is an interesting thing when we think about God. We've basically have taken this idea and we've put it outside of ourselves. We've put God outside of ourselves as something that's greater than us. And then through history, as time went on, we went ahead with that concept, and then we started to worship that thing which we gave power to and made greater than us, and made it entirely external to us. So we conceptualized God and made it a worshipable thing. Now, I'm going to jump around today. So this is going to be just some random ideas, okay? So if God has no mind, and yet human beings and masters, okay, can become that divine, express that divine godly state within us, and we do possess mind, then in a way, as Babaji said, who is greater, a God or humans? Babaji used to make this joke. He said, he said that God was limited in that God couldn't make another one of himself, but Babaji could make as many of himself as he wanted to. So we have this situation where who's in control? Okay. Well, when we look at the world and we look at what Chariji said, that human beings are in charge of evolution, well, clearly, who has created everything on this planet? We human beings have. We've created that. We've created the idea of God. We created that too. We've created all the human religions. We've created that. We've created all the philosophies. We've created all of science. We've created all the cities. We've created the iPhone. We created all that. And yet, something in us, when we're in a moment of despair or a moment of dire need, and I do it too, I go within and I just reach this humble state of Lord, I need your help. And sometimes I use that word Lord, even now, to this day. Okay. So you see, it's an interesting thing. Now, what is God? I think that we haven't really asked the right question. And I think that the question may be, is God a being? Is God a being? Well, for some of us, that might seem natural. We might say, oh, yeah, well, God is a being, but Babaji says God has no mind. So can God be a being with no mind? And I think the answer is probably, we don't know. It can be, we can't say what it is. But that is a possibility too. So if God has no mind, how does it perceive our need? This is where our whole concept of divinity, ourselves and God and everything falls completely apart. Because we can't really say what this is. But I'm going to read a few things that point in a direction that's worth exploring on your own. So first I'm going to read from Lalaji's book, Truth Eternal. But the words I'm going to read are Babaji's words. Babaji was his disciple and his successor, spiritual successor. All right. And here Babaji quotes Lalaji, who said, God has hidden himself, or itself, if we want to say that, inside your hearts and exposed you. Hide yourselves and expose God. God has hidden itself inside your hearts and exposed you. Hide yourselves and expose God. And then he says, this is the real sadhana or practice. This is the real practice. So we can think about this and say, okay, on this spiritual journey, when we can relieve ourselves of our I-ness and transcend, not get rid of, but transcend the ego. And we reach that state of such humble supplication where there's no real I in us. This is when this thing of we call God then manifests through us. That's when we become masterly. That's when we become the goal of our life, the goal, our objective, is that there's no more small identity, but this principle of divinity is fully being expressed through us. And that can only happen when we hide ourselves. And we do that through the practice of letting go through meditation. Okay. Now, Babaji gives a quote here, and I'm not sure who he's quoting, but in this quote, he's talking about religion. But in this particular sense, and this is back in 1944 probably, or that very early on, this writing, religion he's referring to in a positive light. He's referring to it as our spiritual journey in a way. But he says, performance of customs and adherence to rituals is no religion at all. And then he gives the tips: open-mindedness, good temperament, sympathy, courtesy, one-pointedness of thought, to know oneself, and love and equality with human beings constitute real religion, constitute one's real spirituality. Real craving for God will be found only in one person out of thousands. What is real love for God? Here it comes. It is a state when the trinity of the lover, the beloved, and love itself disappear. I'll read this again. What is real love for God? It is a state when the trinity of the lover, the beloved, and love itself disappear. So, this morning I wrote down something, just quickly here, about that God, we could maybe say God is that which has no opposite. So we can't say what it is. But if we say, and I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying this is the idea that came to me, that God is that which has no opposite. And therefore, when we read this again, we see that real love for God also has, there's no opposite, because it's the state when the trinity of the lover, the beloved, and love itself disappear. So there can't be anything that's loving God, because that would be I-ness again. We're saying, oh God, I love you so much. But Babaji clarifies that's not the real love for God. So now we start to get at, the deepest layers here. Okay. I'm jumping from book to book. I have so many yellow underlines here. It's going to be hard to keep up with them all. Now, I want to talk about this from the perspective of our journey as Babaji describes it. We've talked about the journey through the heart region, where we cross these spiritual centers within our body, these chakras, that are all related to the world and all related to duality. Then we enter what's called the mind region. And the mind region are this region of I-ness. These are various levels of how I perceive myself. What I think I am, what I think God is, what I think you are. It's all about identity, our various levels of identity. And in this journey towards being divinized, we have to cross all of those levels of ego. And then we reach what he calls the central region. And Babaji also explains that this was Lalaji's discovery, that prior to Lalaji, this knowledge was not available and was not known at all. So, in this journey of heartfulness, our goal is that we proceed on and on and on and reach what Babaji calls and the masters call the center. And Babaji uses the word center to refer to God. But instead of saying God, how beautiful to say it's the center. Center. It's amazing. It's a great, beautiful concept. So here's the journey. at the highest level, I'm reading from a chapter called The Central Region. So Babaji's describing how we feel when we're approaching this central region and the changes and things that happen within our consciousness and beyond. Some feel that mind, God, guru, master, or whatever object they have adopted for their ideal is really the one that's at work, is the actual doer. So what Babaji explains here, he says, here the idea of the physical body, that the physical body is doing the action, is forgotten. So now, after we've crossed the heart region of dualities, we've crossed the mind region of stages of I-ness. I is the doer, I is the thinker, I is the beer. Now we enter this central region and our condition becomes very different, where instead of us feeling that I am the doer, we start to feel that mind, God, guru, master, or whatever object we've adopted for our ideal is actually the thing that's working through us. So we feel that that object is working. Now he says, go further and you will see that whatever is being done by you is not through the agency of either the body or something inward or epitomized above. Now you take the right course and feel that the work is being done automatically, with no idea of the doer. Neither your body nor the mind is the doer, nor do you feel any other agency doing the work. You only feel the work being done automatically, in whatever way it might be. In this state, the questions how, by whom, or through what agency do not even cross your mind. You go further ahead and no longer even feel the work being done. Rather, you have no idea whatsoever of the work being done either before or after the action has taken place, but it goes on automatically as need demands. It can better be understood by the following example. A man is sleeping. Mosquitoes or ants bite him during sleep, or he feels some itching sensation. His hand automatically goes to that part of the body and he rubs or scratches it according to his need. But he remains in the sleeping state. Now, he had no idea of the action either before, during, or after it. And when he wakes up, he does not even remember anything about it. When this condition is attained, the sleeping state in the waking condition, you go on with it further, doing everything as circumstances demand, without any idea of the work or its doer. Then the actions you do leave no impression whatsoever on you, and a little beyond, it is turned into pure identity. Okay, we've talked about identity, we've talked about this. So what we're getting at now, and after 3 years of this group being together, we're finally coming to the central region's concepts, okay, is that our spiritual journey gets us to a point where this idea of doership totally dissolves. There's no longer an I that's culpable. There's no longer an I that's the doer. The body's not doing something. The mind's not doing something. So we are not attached with our actions or the result of our actions. And when we reach that state, that is a true state of liberation. That's a true state of liberation. Now, does that mean that we're no longer there? Does that mean I've become a zombie-like person that's going around with my arms out like this? Yeah. No. Okay. We're very much there because our identity is our pure identity is an expression of the divine. But what we reach is a point where there's no longer any struggle with concepts as of God, because perhaps God is that which has no opposite. And to arrive at that understanding means that we transcend self as we know it, and we become that pure divine self. Okay. Now, I could go on for days about this. But here's what Babaji says about human beings in his Introduction in Ology's book. He says that mankind, human beings are higher than all animals, than angels. None is greater than the human. Even the devas will have to come down again and attain salvation through a human body. Devas meaning the gods, divine beings. Man alone attains the perfection, not even the devas. Is it not amazing that Lalaji attained this perfection within a brief span of 7 months? While only a student, his entire system was transformed into a celestial inner light, and his consciousness ascended and transcended all the known stages and reaches to reach the state of statelessness. This special personality, who was a prodigy of nature, the ultimate reality, brought back to humanity the long-forgotten art of transmission and worked out a novel method of spiritual training which completely relieved the practicant of almost all of his responsibilities. So, he goes on to, he had another person called this whole thing, called the new darshana, or the new teaching, the new path forward. The location of center or God, the discovery of a region beyond the supercosmic sphere called central region, and the ultimate state, termed by Lalaji as Tam, T-A-M, were like a closed book to knowledge. These discoveries have provided food for thought both to the intellectuals and spiritualists alike. Okay. And now I'll read this last part. I am giving an instance of Lalaji's capacity for abiding by the will of God. So even after all of this, even the master at the highest level is so much not there that he attributes everything to God. So God is in its purest state, the idea of God. The word has a purpose. It has a purpose. The word God has become, taken on many meanings, but in its original state, it's that which has no opposite, in my opinion. I am giving an instance of Lalaji's capacity for abiding by the will of God. In his last days, he was suffering from abscess in the liver and was undergoing naturopathy treatment. Pandit Rameshwar Prasad Misra, one of his disciples, was applying the mud poultice externally on his liver. He began to weep to see Lalaji in severest agony on account of the pain. Seeing him weeping, Lalaji said, "It can be removed within minutes if I exercise myself, but I am not touching it because it is all his will, and we must abide by it." So, even the master of that caliber, he could have easily healed himself, as he said, in moments with his profound abilities. But to have that much wisdom to know that, It was his time to leave this world. And in order to leave this world, a cause must come into existence that fulfills the effect that's already there, which is death. So death is the one thing where the effect exists before the cause. Because death, that finality, is already there, a cause will come into existence to fulfill the effect that's already there. So that's at the highest level, the state of mergence with one's will and the will of the divine will. Okay. That was a lot. We'll take this up a little bit at a time over the next few months so that we can digest a little bit more. And in between, you can ponder some of these things. And it's an amazing thing in this practice. When we are in that meditative state, when we reach that point where we are really transcended the workings of the mind and everything, we can still, as a witness, we can still pose a question to ourselves, to the self within. Please help me understand, what is this, what is this divine, what is this principle called God? We can ask the highest questions of ourselves. And when you pause, you can get insights about that on your own. And that's just like the one I had today. This idea that God is that which has no opposite. I mean, wow. I don't know where that came from. And with that, let us meditate together.